Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming today to a special council meeting of Brant County Council. You have an agenda in front of you. We've taken attendance, and everyone who's coming is here. And we have Councillor Garneau and Councillor Pierce on video here joining us from places other than this room. So it doesn't look quite as desperate as it looks in the room here. We do have quorum, and we will continue. That takes us to the number 2 on the agenda, which is the approval of the agenda, noting that there was an addendum, which was the addition of a bylaw. So with that being said, if I could get a motion to approve the agenda with the addendum, Councillor Oakley and Councillor Bell. Any questions to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? And Councillor Pierce, I'm sure his hand is up behind there. Councillor Pierce, are you there? I know that he would want to.
Sorry, I was on mute there, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I am here.
Thank you. That takes us to number 3 on the agenda, which is the declaration of pecuniary interest. I can't imagine any of us have any. If you do find one crop up, please let me be the first person to know. That takes us to our delegation or our presenter. Kayla, could you come up and introduce our speakers? Welcome to the County of Brant.
Yes, thank you for coming out and welcome, and thank you for everyone joining us this evening. I'm just going to give a brief overview, introduction to Phil, and then he's going to get right into his presentation. You'll have time for questions at the end too, so feel free to jot them down through, and we'll have a little discussion at the end. So Phil Montour is a Mohawk of the Bear Clan of the Six Nations of the Grand River. From 1975 to July 2002, Phil started and became the director of the Lands Claims Research Office at the Six Nations of the Grand River, training and developing expertise in land rights at Six Nations. He was the principal architect of the ongoing 1995 litigation against Canada and Ontario for an accounting of all Six Nations lands, resources, and assets supposedly held and managed by the Crowns. As a result of restructuring by the Six Nations Elective Council in 2002, Phil established his own company utilizing his expertise in Indigenous land rights, where he presented and supported Six Nations interventions at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, calling for Canada to resolve their outstanding financial and land frauds presently before the courts. Phil remains active in the 1995 litigation and is an active member of the Six Nations Elected Council's consultation and accommodation team. So thank you, Phil, for joining us today, and I'll let you come up. Thank you. The microphone is on for you, so it's all ready to go.
Say go to everyone here. It's been many years since I've been back here with the elective councils of the Brant County. We had quite a relationship in the past, and I'm going to go through some materials I provided you with. We've been side by side on many issues and trying to convince Canada to come back to the table and negotiate some of these land rights issues, but we weren't successful, unfortunately. We just never worked out. I guess I'll go. Our earliest history is the Haudenosaunee. I'm going to use Haudenosaunee, Six Nations, Five Nations, Iroquois interchangeably because through the long history we have, a very long history of our relationship with the Crown. The first one is, of course, the Turo that some people are familiar with, and that's our relationship with the Crown. First we had it in 1613 with the Dutch, and that's the principles of basically our first treaty. It was done in wampum, and it symbolizes the purple rose, our canoe, and the newcomers' vessels, and they're supposed to be traveling down the river of life together, down the river, and never trying to outpace each other, never crossing over into each other's vessels, respecting each other's culture and awareness and laws and principles, and never want to be dominant over each other. We are supposed to go through life as equals, based on peace, friendship, and respect. The British Crown in 1664 were somewhat jealous, and they wanted a similar relationship treaty with the Five Nations as we had with the Dutch. And as such, we entered into one with them. the Five Nations, we had a vast territory. Uh, you know, we had the Indian, well, we'll call them the beaver hunting wars, the trade wars with other indigenous nations. And through from New York State to the Pennsylvanias, along the Allegheny Mountains, where the newcomers were coming into our territories. We entered into early treaties. And we had skirmishes with other indigenous nations throughout this area in the early 1600s. Mainly the neutral were actually the ancestral to the area where we're sitting here now. And they were absorbed into the Five Nations, they're Iroquois speaking, as well as some of the Eries. And further north were the Huron Wyandots, who had allied themselves with the French. And the Five Nations, the Iroquois and the Five Nations did not get along with the French. And because they were allies with them, we ended up having a battle with the Hurons and basically conquered them or chased them out of this territory further north. So we had, because of the trade wars, the beaver hunting grounds, that was the economy of the day. And it created the wars among us because we were also being as ploys against the British battles against the French. So we very well, we were the middleman and we were quite the deciding factors because of our military strength. And we were used as allies of Great Britain because we had entered into treaties with them. And we fought them and defeated the French. So this is the history of the Erie, Neutral, and the Hurons. And as I said, they were absorbed into the Neutrals, were absorbed into the Five Nations, into this area where we are today. To get peace among us, there was around 40 of our indigenous nations met in Montreal, and we decided there would be no more war among ourselves. And we all agreed to share the lands. And it's called that we entered into the following 1701 treaty was known as the Montreal Peace, was a dish with one spoon, where we all agreed that we were going to share the natural resources that this country had. No one was ever to be greedy. We were supposed to keep that bowl clean out of respect. And this is where you get the environmental principles that we must protect all living things. So that's part of our treaties we had among us. It was not about ownership of land. It was about how we're going to share, how we're going to respect each other as we move forward in a peaceful and righteous manner. It was about peace. Following the treaty, the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, the Five Nations, we did enter into a treaty with Great Britain. And it's called the Fort Albany or the NANFAM Treaty, which covers a large area of Ontario. And what that was, we were still at odds with the French. And we agreed that, in our treaty, that we would allow the king to place his castles upon our lands for protection against invasion by the French. And in fact, there was at least three in this part of Ontario that we know we called upon the King of England to honor this treaty. And we pushed that he remove the French forts from Detroit, the one at Niagara, and also the one at Frontenac, Kingston. So we held Great Britain's feet to the fire to honor this treaty. And I've always kind of had a little bit of a pun here that if the Five Nations had not imposed our strength and made Great Britain honor this treaty, we could have all been part of Vuffonce down here at one, who knows what would have happened. It was just a passage of times. So that stayed in effect, and it was about up to 1725 that we made them remove those treaties, those French forts from our territory. And then, of course, our early history, we are allies of Great Britain, and we got caught up in the American Revolution. And being allies of Great Britain, we fought alongside them. Not all of the Five Nations did. It split the Five Nations. Some stayed with the U.S. side and some under the leadership of Joseph Brant. Captain Joseph Brant. He was not a political leader. He was, in fact, a military leader, a great military leader that the British Army relied on heavily because he could round up the Five Nations for the battles. But at the end of the treaty, at the American Revolution, the Treaty of Paris was signed, and the Five Nations, we felt betrayed because we took it to the king. What right have you got to establish the Canada-U.S. border on our lands, and it was lands that we only allowed you to walk upon? So these were, there were challenging times because we had lost many of our warriors during this battle, thinking that we were going to be treated very well by Great Britain and all our agreements would have been honored. Unfortunately, it never ended up that way. But to redeem themselves, the king had directed Sir Frederick Oldham that they lay out a tract of land 6 miles deep on either side of the Grand River, beginning at Lake Erie to its source. And this brings us to where we are today, where Brant County is located within this area of the Haldimand Tract. And it's the lands that I started working on this, as they mentioned, in 1975. We went through all of our history. I had to gather all of the government documents from the National Archives of Canada, the Ontario Archives, New York State records, Newberry Library in Chicago, and many of our records in London, England as well, because many of these agreements were entered into pre-Canada days. So I was able to go through, and what I'm really proud of is our own people. We taught and developed our own people who now know all of these transactions. You have computers, but we also have our own people that know these. So there's the Haldimand Tract as laid out from the previous slide I showed you. And on a lot-by-lot basis, we can pretty well account for any misrepresentation or fraud that occurred throughout that territory. So it's about 950,000 acres. And we can pretty well indicate to the Crown and point out, using their own documents, by the way, I must emphasize that, using Canada's own written documents that emphasize the misappropriation of our lands, the frauds that occurred, the misappropriation of our funds by the Crown. So that brings us to where we are. The 1995 court case, we tried many times to resolve these with Canada. But after we were going through this process with what Canada had, their specific claims policy. And every claim that was being counter-researched by Canada was being validated. They agreed, yes, if you go to court, you're probably going to win. But we'll make you an offer of, there were ridiculous offers that were made. In many cases, I'll give you the last example was down near Dunnville. It's called Moulton Township. It was for an area of 30,800 acres. And there was a 999-year, there was a lease mortgage on that property. 30,800 acres. But because of the size of it, and Canada was reported in the 1890s that nothing had been paid on those properties way back into the early years, but Canada did nothing to resolve it. They made us an offer of about $113.50 an acre. Now, much of the stuff I downloaded, and I think it's part of their packages that they have. It's kind of covered in the Global Solutions, which we're updating now with the court case, and we'll make that available to the public as well. So it's matters like that were taken before the courts. We shouldn't have to, but it was necessary. Because every day things are changing, developments are occurring, disputes are arising. Well, that's what we have been trying to avoid. And we've had relationships with Brant County, which were strong and good, and through the years they have been, I won't say forgotten, but just not acted upon. Many reasons on both sides. Change of our governments, your municipal governments, provincial governments, federal governments, COVID. Believe me, I've heard them all in the court saying why they've not moving forward with any of this. These are examples. Many people say, well, what are you guys whining about if you got paid for it? Well, we never did. You know, the money might have got, some monies might have been paid for some lands. But without our knowledge, our money was being invested by the Crown to build this country. You know, invest in Upper Canada Bank stocks. Government debts. Why were we paying government debts? Churches in Brantford, bridges in Cayuga. Again, government debts. County war law, country's war losses in the 1840s and 47. We weren't even in those wars. You know, our last battle with on behalf of the Crowns was the War of 1812. Canals, railways, City of Toronto, the infrastructure, you know, bridges, roads. Welland Canal Company down at that was established when they built the dam at Dunnville and raised the water level so they could make a feeder dam. So they established the Welland Canal system, which then makes the St. Lawrence Seaway viable. Those were all done on our lands without payment, and even at the end of the day, we found out they flooded our lands using our money without our knowledge. So, you know, Law Society of Upper Canada, you know, that was a legal system. You know, as the history goes on, in 1927, the Crown passed legislation forbidding us from hiring lawyers. You know, it was a whole mockery. And I appreciate the fact, Mayor, that you invited us here and we're allowed to come and say our side, because this is an issue that has to be cleared up, because I'll get into it later. It's going to affect your municipality as well. So we got public debts, Municipal Council of Haldimand, Upper Canada Building Funds. You know, it just goes on and on. Those are just examples, and these are coming right out of Canada's own financial statements in Ottawa. So now I will get into Brantford Township, being that's where we are, Brant County here. As I mentioned, if I go through the entire track, I'd be here all evening, and I don't want to bore you with that. So Brantford Township, it was an area of 48,000 acres. And that land, going back in this time period in the 1830s, and actually the town plot of Brantford as well was similar. The land tenure in the early years, the crown of the day was actually inviting people to settle on lands, not in this area, but in other areas. And they were basically given land away on lands that the Crown had already had under their purported jurisdiction. But under the Haldimand Tract, because of the Royal Proclamation of 1763, a consent of the First Nation would have to be given if a transaction was to occur, and it would have to be done with the Crown. So, bring that forward, there was rules and regulations that you couldn't trespass on native land, you couldn't go and buy it without going through the Crown. You know, basically the Crown set themselves up as the fiduciary trustee for us, whether we had say or not. You know, meanwhile, we fought alongside of them with equals, but just through their legislation. That's the way the story unfolded. But the biggest problem we had back then was the trespasses. We had trespassing coming into the Haldimand Tract. That was, the Grand River basically was the road into this part of Canada. And what that did was create a lot of trespassing on properties that we never agreed to for the sale or surrender or relinquish or any agreements with the Crown. Because in other areas, the earlier part of the tract going to the north, if you read the Global Solution, the breakdown, we had 999-year mortgages on those properties that were going to create a continual revenue stream for us. So we had agreements for that. So you're dealing from basically all Kitchener, Waterloo, all the way up to Fergus area. So like I say, that's another part of issues, and we're going through that through the courts as well. That's all part of the big accounting claim. But for Brantford Township, just like the original town of Brantford, Brant County, it was also to stop the trespassers that the Crown said if you will agree to surrender and sell that part in blue that shows up on the map where the arrows are, Brantford Township, we promise the trespassing will stop. Well, it never, and the squatters on our territory will be removed. Never happened. It never happened. So it was more or less of a conditional agreement, but the Crown through the years, they just sold the land and never disregarded the rest because I'll be very blunt, their priority was to develop Ontario. So they catered to the newcomers to develop and build Ontario. Kind of reminds me of something we're hearing today with Ford, isn't it? But anyways, so we have Brantford Town, the township is laid out. 40,000, and we can go by a lot through a lot by lot analysis, and we can show the Crown what lots are paid for, never paid for, money's outstanding, what agreements were made. Like in Brant County, there was a tract of land, quite a controversial tract of land, was actually for King's College, and they were granted that land, and their agreement was all us students from Six Nations, we could go to the King's College at no cost. Well, that was never honored, but yet they got the land. So there's ongoing lot by lot analysis that are going to be challenged. It's just so voluminous. You can point out any given lot in our office at the research office. I can very well bring up what is wrong with that piece of property or what is appropriate with that piece of property. But then challenge goes, where did that money from that go? Did it actually go into the Welland Canal system? Did it go to the Grand River Navigation Company? Did it go to help finance McGill University when it went bankrupt? You know, those are the type of things that we're getting into. So, because this isn't a court case and everyone's aware of it, you know, we've in 1995, we did work very well with the County of Brant. We educated on them. These are issues. These should not be. We should not be pitting one against each other. That it's the Crown. They failed the Six Nations people, but they also failed you. And the way the system is set up, and the way the court's going, and the way the downloading's going onto the municipality, we've got to work together and come up with some way that we can proceed as neighbors to get through this. And in another area, and actually it's where Paris is today, you take the meets and bounds description for the area that's in the bluish, and the northern boundary of that bluish, and you take the meets and bounds descriptions for the block 1, which is in the red, they do not meet. There is that tract of land between there where there is no transactions, no lawful alienation of those lands whatsoever. Our challenge is, how do we resolve our land issues with the Crown where our neighbors aren't going to get hurt? That's a challenge, and we're going to need your help to come up with a solution. Because that's the problem with the courts. There's a winner and there's a loser. And at the end of the day, a negotiated agreement would be the best. And it's about relationships, because that's what our treaties were based on, were relationships. And as I said before, we worked with Brant County as such to try and proceed forward. We have other lands that were leased within Brant County. They were just leased life leases. Some were life leases, some were just leases, but there was never compensation paid. But the Crown gave them Crown patents for those properties. And Ontario, whether it was paid for or not, they say we stand behind our land registry system. Well, I don't think they're going to be saying that too much in the court system, but we'll see. Birch Track. That's another area that was never covered by any agreement to have those lands alienated. So this is Brant County lands. You know, you're going to be at the forefront. And the other part, which I just realized I didn't put in here, is it's called the Johnson Settlement. Those are lands that were to be leased for 21-year periods with 7-year renewals. And it was confirmed that that would happen by an order in council of October 4th, 1843, along with Eagles Nest Tract, the Martins Bend. So those properties were intended for leasing purposes. Now they're not. Now some of that's have been annexed owned by the city of Brantford now under their jurisdiction. We were trying to work, and actually we were working well with Brant County when this the land, what do you call it, when they expanded, the city of Brantford expanded their boundaries. We actually met here with the province brought in a mediator. And we're not certain what happened. All of a sudden, the next meeting, there was no next meeting with us. There was a deal cut. And promises that were made were forgotten. But we didn't forget. But so that's something. That's more on the lines with the city of Brantford. Because we always looked at our Brant County as our allies to get through these challenging times. So we'll get back to that. So we've got parcels right here under this administration's jurisdiction that we've got to come up with some solutions for. Now, what happens is there's the Supreme Court of Canada. They've laid out there is a legal duty to consult and accommodate with First Nations. So, you know, we're not just grumbling. It's established by the Supreme Court of Canada. So, if we're going to follow the law, and that's what people say, you don't follow the law because you have blockades. Well, after a while, you get frustrated, and that leads into blockades. Let's try and avoid all of that. Let's sit down and talk as intelligent people and come up with solutions. So, the Supreme Court of Canada says it's the duties of the crowns to deal with this. Now, what the Ontario government has done under provincial statements and under the Municipal Act, they are downloading that responsibility onto the municipalities. It's not fair, but that's what they've done and are doing. I don't know what heads up or consultation they did within the municipalities that this is going to be in your bailiwick. I expect none. But this is what, if we don't come up with a working relationship, this is what pits Six Nations against the county of Brant. When we don't want to be in that boat. We want to be able to work with these challenging situations. Because these lands, you know, it's going to be resolved. It's been 28 years in court, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel finally coming within a year. We'll find out. It's Six Nations versus Canada and Ontario. That should be actually Six Nations versus the corporation of the city of Brantford and Ontario. We did start a legal action in 2008 against the city of Brantford because they didn't want to sit down and talk about their developments that were just going on and on and on. You know, the environment to us was not being, our archaeological work that's required was not being monitored properly. But we agreed in 2013 to put that litigation in abeyance. We shouldn't have to be in court with our neighbors. We shouldn't have to be. So those are the type of challenges that we at Six Nations are facing, and you are facing. And our community is getting agitated. You know, we still got people occupying land in Caledonia. They're just fed up. It's taken too long, and I totally agree with them. But we shouldn't have to be doing this. So when I talk about relationships, you know, we've taken political initiatives. Six Nations has always been lobbying and politics. I guess you're not supposed to say lobbying anymore, but educating the federal ministers and their bureaucracy. And actually, there was on December 11th, 2012, and that's what we heard the first time in Ottawa, was that's the first time they ever saw municipalities, Brant County and Six Nations joined us to meet with all these ministers for an entire day, as many as we could get in. Come to the table, Canada. We've got to solve this problem. It's hurting our relationship between each other. Um, we've been to the United Nations with this issue. We've been to the provincial governments, but we've not heard boo since the present government has been in for the province of Ontario, and it's unfortunate. And I think I believe Mayor, you were up in London when they met with under the Ontario Municipal Association. They had the surrounding municipalities had strong words for the Indigenous affairs for the province there. And I guess you can't answer the blank stares because that's all we got, really. It was sad. And you wanted answers, we wanted answers, none were given. So these are the issues. Now, there's a lot of opportunities here for us to do, And with the support of Brant County, I think, with the support of the city of Brantford, with the support of surrounding municipalities, we were actually able to quietly start a side table for trying to get these negotiations going again. And we were quite successful. We had a round table set up. We had an MOU established on what we were going to discuss. Some of them was revenue sharing. Some of them are how do we deal with the big housing crisis we have on Six Nations? How do we get safe water on Six Nations? How do we've got some major problems that we've got to address that are inadequate. And then when we see our money went out the front door to Toronto and elsewhere, it is quite upsetting. It is quite upsetting. But we were sitting down there and discussing it. We had Ontario and Canada and Six Nations. We were at the table. And then after when the Ford government got in, they pulled a negotiator away from the table. We've not heard boo since on how we're going to resolve these issues. But we're still at the table with Canada. And we're still going to try and resolve as many issues as we can. But in the past, these challenges, rather than getting adversarial, we tried to work with everyone. We established the Grand River Notification Agreement, which is presently works. I believe you have representatives attend that in attendance in that from the Brant County as well today. But on the flip side, Canada now has withdrawn their support for that information session. It's just the games go on. November 8th, 2012, we established the accommodation charter for the Brant 403 Business Park. Some initiatives began, but then that's kind of died away. Six Nations in the County of Brant, we had a Green Energy Economic Development Accord. I've not heard any follow-up with what's happening with those. And in 2015, we had a tripartite agreement with Six Nations, the County of Brant, and the Corporation of the City of Brantford. And we could say again, different election time frames have come in. The corporate memory seems to have been lost. But there's been our COVID. That's the one everybody uses, and it's a valid one. But that relationship has diminished. And I think that's sad because what's going to happen in this court case, and we're seeing it, Canada's blaming Ontario, Ontario's blaming Canada. And what I see under the jurisdiction, the way it's been set up, is Ontario then going to blame and bring in on the municipalities. And the municipalities, I realize your hands are tied on many issues. But then you have developers who then, when you try to correct something, they go to a tribunal on you. We're in quite a mess here when we're trying to move this all forward and build this relationship. That's the challenge we have. As I said before, our court case is not against Brant County. Our court case is against Canada, it is against Ontario, and I really don't like the way that it's evolving with the legislation that's putting it on the shoulders of the municipalities. But, you know, we can be defensive about it and wait till the court case is decided, or we can start to reestablish these working relationships again as good neighbors. And that's the challenge I put to the Brant County as well. We've got a new council, so we've got to update them on this relationship as well. You know, we got homework to do on our side. Don't get me wrong, we always do. So that's kind of where we're at today. The courts. We hope to be in the final stage of the courts in trial in 2024. It's taken 28 years to get us this far, and Canada's pretty well run out of their gambit of delays. We've beaten them on pretty well every turn now, so I don't think they can hide anymore. So I'm opening up to hopefully political leaderships get together and carry forward, because it's an opportune time now to start planning this, because there's a lot of benefits both sides can make. You know, green energy or joint venturing, something. It's how creative you can be, because I know some of the ills you have are the same ills we share. So maybe we can tackle some of these together. So that's, without going into the entire Haldeman Tract land claims process, I just try to concentrate on Brant County and what we're faced with here. It's going to be similar with the other municipalities up and down the river. But I give you credit. Whoever thought of inviting me here to speak about this and get the ball rolling, this is something that we should be doing with every municipality. And we were at one time. I'll be very frank about it. We were. On that part, we dropped the ball. Because education is the biggest factor here that needs to happen. So with that, Honorable Mayor, I'm really cutting this short from what I usually do.
Well, thank you for coming and speaking with us. I know that Mayor Davis and myself and Ava Hill,
Yeah.
and then we had meetings, the three of us, and we've talked about having a tri-council meeting many times, and for whatever reason, the timing's never right. And then with Chief Hill, Mark, we met again, the three of us,
Yeah.
and we talk about tri-council. So now that Sherry Lynn's there, Sherry Lynn Hill, I've never met her yet, but we're going to get together, Kevin and I, and Mayor Davis and myself and Sherry Lynn. We're going to figure out, and we are going to have a tri-council meeting as soon as we can, just because the last one went so terribly wrong. I guess you remember the highlights of that. I remember the highlights of that, and I wasn't even the mayor, but I certainly caught the details at 11 on the news. So it went terribly wrong. And but as you said, the players are always different.
Yeah.
And I think the players make the difference. I know how Mark felt about things, and I certainly know how Mr. Rickford feels about things. That was a terrible meeting.
Yes.
It was embarrassing for us to be there. It was embarrassing that you didn't get your answers. It was more confusing leaving that meeting than it was moving in. But you have to know that you've got a friend in the county of Brant. We do respect everything about the Six Nations. I do. I can't, I guess, speak for my whole council, but I've always been very interested and I've always been very welcome there. And I'm glad that you came, and there's things that you've told us today that I didn't know. And I think it's things we need to know, because you need to know the history before you can develop a fruitful
Sure.
future. We have to know these things. And I've always been treated very, very well. And I think the County of Brant shows a lot of respect with the Indigenous issues. I'm embarrassed that we don't have a land acknowledgement done by now. I haven't been the mayor forever, but I've been the mayor long enough that I should have had something, I think, done sooner than this. But it doesn't matter. It's going to happen now. And it's going to be one that we put together through talking with your people, and it's going to be the right one. It's going to be done right. It's going to be done with respect, and and at the school,
Mhm.
we're gonna be doing a lot of work at the school. There's a lot of work to be done there too. And, so we will meet. And, are there any questions before we go any further? Counselor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One question and one comment. Question through you to Phil. Phil, the current boundaries of Six Nations today, when were they established? I mean, I've been around for over half a century and they've always been there as far as I know, but I know they weren't always there. But when were they established?
We were whittled down to where we are now in about 1843. Uh, Basically, it was, well, even that in itself was maybe I should have brought my big PowerPoint. If we would relinquish some of our holdings on the north side of the Grand River, basically we were going to get from the Mount Pleasant Road right down to Dunn Township on the south side. Never happened. So there's no relinquishment of any of our interests on the north side. Like that's the last promise that was broken to us. Instead, we just got squashed into this, uh, 46,000 acres. It's less than 5% of what was promised us.
Yeah. Okay. So for 170
Oh,
years.
yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, because I've looked that up. I could never quite find it. So, just a comment. I think you appreciate the fact that we as a municipality, as the county, we can't fix the wrongs of the past, and we can't negotiate the trees. I think everybody understands that. But what we at the county can be, I think, is good neighbors,
Yeah.
right? And I think we around this table should be working towards that, and I think we would. um, if given the opportunity. And I know in the past we have, since I was on council, we have had the tri-council meetings. You know, we would meet, the city would host it, and then the county would host it, and then Six Nations hosted it, and we would break bread. And then it just stopped. And I asked, well, why did we stop then? It's because, well, we're not accomplishing anything. But just the fact that we met, we got to know each other.
Yeah.
And getting to know each other, I think it strengthens those relationships, and then you can move forward. And I know we've done projects with Six Nations in the past, and we always have a higher probability of success whenever we partner with the Six Nations. So I'd like to see that come back. So if you're looking for suggestions, Mr. Mayor, I would like to see us do the tri-council again, just to get to know everybody, and yeah, just so we're all working on the same page. Because I know, like I say, we can't fix the wrongs of the past. We can't fix a lot of things, but we can be good neighbors, and we can do that by certainly getting to know our neighbors better. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Counselor Miller. Counselor Garneau, please. Jeez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Phil, I want to say thank you for your presentation today. And I want to ask, and I'm not sure if you speak on behalf of yourself or Six Nations, but I will indicate today my farm is within the Johnson settlement. It is part of the registered land claim. And in today's discussion, we acknowledge that a lot of those decisions are happening at higher levels of government. That said, for individual residents today, it creates a discomfort of not knowing what to do and what is the right thing to do. And I'm not entirely sure what I'm asking specifically, but if you might comment on what you would say to the folks who are living on these lands today, for where the compensation that is due to the First Nations has not been fulfilled. What can an individual resident do to help move things forward towards reconciliation, please?
That is a very consistent feeling out there because, as I said before, the Crown's the ones who messed all of this up. Our litigation is not intended to take people. We can't be taking land away from people. Two wrongs aren't going to make a right here. It's how do we move forward in a relationship where there's a revenue sharing, be it with a municipality or the province or the feds. What the issue here is, it's so big. You know, how do we come up with a solution that is digestible for everyone? I think that's kind of the challenge. And if we can get into some sort of an arrangement where partnerships are created, and the left hand and right hand, we know what each other's doing, what's expected of each other. You know, if we find, I'm not pinpointing anything in the Johnson settlement or anywhere else, but someone's creating a landfill site on a piece of property down here, you're going to hear from us. You know, we're going to have to be involved because many of our ancestors are in the ground, and when development occurs, they're disrupted. And many of the environmental issues that have gone on in the past has created nightmares for environmental safety for anyone who comes behind them. You know, there was a time when, well, actually, Six Nations is home to the largest Carolinian forest in Canada. At one time, this whole area was a large Carolinian forest. Obviously, it isn't today. It's an agriculture community. We understand that. We respect that. But, you know, I grew up coming up here to play hockey at the Paris Arena. There certainly wasn't the housing developments around that we're seeing here now. And it's on land, as I pointed out, on lands that basically there's no legal agreement for them to be occurring. How do we come up with a solution for that? We don't want to hurt those people. They've invested their lives in their houses. You know, we want to make it sure that our good neighbors aren't hurt as well, because we know what that feels like. Two wrongs aren't going to make a right here. How do we go forward? Put the pressure on your members of parliament. That's all I can say, provincial and federal. You know, I don't want to leave in the mind that we're coming after people's houses and lands. That's not the issue here. That is not the issue. How are we going to get through this dilemma in a positive manner that our rights are respected as well as your individual rights? Because that's the basics of our whole foundation: peace, friendship, and respect. And that's how we want to proceed. But it can't be one-sided. That's a challenge. And I'm looking forward to you, Counselor. If you come up with a solution, call me.
Are there any, Council, I don't know who was first, so I'm going to go to Councillor Kyle and then Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Phil, thank you for your presentation. And sort of along the same lines as Councillor Garneau's question, but more from the municipal side of things. I know with the duty to consult, when we receive a planning application, for example, often that report comes with comments from Six Nations, from the Mississaugas of the Credit, and school boards, all these external agencies. And one of the questions that I've asked several times, because I'll see comments in there where there are some concerns from the folks in Six Nations. How do we adequately address those concerns in a way that allows us to move forward, knowing there's an asterisk there that if we say no, they take it to the OLT and it's out of our hands anyways? But how can we ensure that those applications, before they get to that point, are addressing the concerns of the folks on Six Nations?
Okay. Well, let me recognize the good work done by your administration here. The planning and all that, they work very well with them. In fact, Dylan's part of our CAP team, and he receives a lot of these. Thank goodness I don't have to, but we try to work with them. But it's a matter, their hands are tied how far they can go. And I think it'd be nice if it turned it into our leadership. How do we come up with what you're asking for here? A solution on how we understand how we're going to go forward among the tripartite council here. I think that's where I'm in trouble already here. I know, because our council just got in and I'm already putting them in. But that's what has to happen. I think we got to have this political push. And don't be afraid of it. There's opportunities here. That's how I look at this. You know, just saying it's somebody else's problem, that that's not a cure, and it's coming back to bite us now. Because our community, they're knowledgeable, they're frustrated, and unfortunately, sometimes that frustration doesn't come out in the most positive way. So I think if we can build something really positive and move forward, that's what I'd like to see happen here. So we need the political will of the leaderships on all sides.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Phil. The documents you shared with us, I read with a lot of interest. And one of your comments earlier was about sharing revenues. At least my experience now, 5 years in council, is that every dollar we take in, we put straight back out again in terms of services to our community. It's not like we have a stack of money sitting over there that
I understand.
we can share. So in terms of revenues, we literally don't have revenues to share other than at the expense of not providing the services to the people actually who provide most of that funding. On the positive side, I'm on the board of BME with the Mayor and Councillor Pearce, who is online. And we've done lots of good work with and for Six Nations. And I think that's been very fruitful. And that's certainly a good example. You quoted it earlier. But can you think of other things that we can be doing that allow us to work together? The good neighborliness, I mean, who could say no to that? I mean, that's true in all things we do. But practically, we run an incredibly tight ship, and we're going to go into budgets again in a couple of months' time, and we're going to be worried about putting a burden on our community. And so, if you've got thoughts about how we might work together on a practical level, I'd like to hear them.
You know, we did have the arrangement for your Brant Park, the Oak Park, no, Brant Park. Your biggest, and part of that, I think it was Adidas who was there, and we had discussed with them, and they had accommodated the structure for solar panels over that 1 million square foot building. You know, and there was going to be, through the Green Energy Act, the revenue sharing, so we'd all be part of that. And as partners, we'd go forward. Unfortunately, the Green Energy Act got canned. But, you know, that's how you step outside the box and create a shared or some sort of a revenue sharing out of that. There's issues. There's how you know, I know you've got a big challenge with the aggregate industry in Brant County. Well, Ontario's collecting money. I know the municipalities collects money. But it's actually on lands that those are our natural resources that are being taken, and Ontario's the one who is issuing the permits. Ontario, when in 2006 we did a study, there was over $4 billion in revenue every year, as in 2006, was collected by federal, provincial, and municipal governments out of the Haldimand Tract. It wouldn't take very much, guys. Who shares that? I don't know. I don't know what that tax revenue is today. It's far more than that, I know. There's numerous ways. Land transfer taxes. You know, the province, they sit there on lands that are the title is corrupt, and they're still collecting the revenues on, say, land transfer taxes, pocketing it. There's a lot of ways to do this.
I'm looking at the list you have there from monies collected by municipalities within the Haldimand Tract, and you list a whole lot of stuff there. And basically, we're the tax collector for the provincial government. We're not collecting them. Certainly not this amount of money for ourselves. And if I might just talk a little bit about land, and I wish we as the municipality had more land. But actually, we are very land poor. We want to extend affordable housing in our community. And that one of the biggest challenges we have is that we don't actually have any land of our own, or sufficient land of our own, to make that happen. Land is in the hands of individuals, and certainly not within the municipality. I'm sure you're aware of that, but it kind of makes it difficult to know how to move forward on that particular issue.
I think,
Any thoughts?
well, that's something we can think about because being strapped for land, we certainly are as well. You know, we face the same crisis you do, and it really came to light when COVID come out just how many of our families had to coop up in one little house. You know, uh, there's challenges, but we're not going to get there unless we sit down and brainstorm together on this. And as long as you're open, we can work on it. You know, there's other ways: land transfer taxes, anything the province does. Because I want to try and get it back to Canada and Ontario, are the ones should be paying. And if we don't come up with some sort of a strategy, it's going to be you guys paying. I mean, I might as well be blunt about it. We got to get active.
I mean, sorry to be blunt back, we don't have the money. I mean, we don't have it. It all belongs to the province or the federal government. We literally we're only allowed to take in as much as we need to spend to maintain the services to our community. We don't build up a treasure chest that we could share. I mean, it really is that simple, Bill.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm looking for, first of all, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's one thing to be invited, it's another thing to show up, so thank you for showing, thank you for showing up. And
Oh,
thank,
Dalen,
thank you for
you got any
being,
words about the, if I could, didn't mean to interrupt, about the consultation process? Oh, okay.
come up to the podium. Okay. Tell us your name and tell us what you do for the Six Nations.
So my name is Dalen G. I am a land use officer for Six Nations of the Grand River. I work in the Lands and Resources Department, which Phil founded. So kind of to go back to Councillor Kyle's your question. So like I deal with a lot of development applications from Brant County, Brantford, Haldeman, Regional Waterloo, like you name it. There's a lot of things that come across my desk, and I am just one person, so I can't obviously make comments on them all. And one of the big, I guess, kind of issues is, you know, I'll get a development for wherever it's happening. You know, okay, this is happening. Like, you have 14 days to make your comments back on this particular development. Well, it's kind of hard for me because I'm seeing like tens and tens and tens of these things come across my desk every day. So it's kind of hard for me to make actually like meaningful comments in that short period of time. So like one, I guess, like suggestion I have would just be like kind of notifying us like at an earlier stage in the process, or like maybe even like dedicating like maybe like once a month we kind of have a meeting with Brant County and we just kind of just talk about, hey, like these are some of the things that are coming down the pipe. Here's just kind of a heads up, so you kind of have more of an idea of what's coming, because it is a lot of a million acres. Like it's a lot of land that we have to try to protect, even if it's one tree at a time. I try to do what I can. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to say that. Thanks.
Well, see, having said that, now that's very helpful, because we can do stuff like that. And if that's making your job easier and we're able to do it, absolutely we would. So I mean, it's now a public record that you've said that, and we can act on that. So and now with the virtual options, I mean, we don't have to travel. I understand how big the Haldeman track is and how much work you probably have to go through. So, but it's easy to set up a call like this and just go through what you need to go through. So thank you for saying that. I'm sure that we can accommodate that.
Yeah, thanks. Like that would be amazing. And like Phil was saying, our treaties are all based off like relationships, right? So if we can build these relationships any way we can, I think that's a great move going forward. So thank you.
No, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to now, since they've both spoken and we're very grateful for everything we heard, look for a motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Bell, Councillor Oakley, are there any other comments or concerns? All those in favor? There you go. Thank you very much. You can either leave now or you can wait and hear us do our bylaw. Whatever you like.
Thank you once again, but a lot of respect.
Thank you. Thank you. which does take us to number 5 on the agenda, and that is a bylaw that we have to clear up. And Councillor Kyle, you're going to bring that to us?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McAlpine, that bylaw 130-23 be read a first time.
Thank you. All those in favor of the first reading of the bylaw? Opposed? Second reading, please, Councillor Kyle.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McAlpine, that bylaw 130-23 be read a second time and all clauses and preambles be adopted.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the second reading of the bylaws? Councillor Bell?
Just for clarification, Mr. Mayor, if somebody would say why it's come into a special meeting, what's the urgency with this?
I'll let the clerk tell you all about that.
It's through Mayor Bailey to Councillor Bell. It is my understanding that this bylaw was supposed to be on Tuesday evening's agenda, and there was through absences it didn't make it there. It's my understanding that this is being enacted tomorrow.
Okay, so this is just normal business and we just unfortunately missed it. Yeah, okay, thank you.
We missed it. We just missed it. Yep. Are there any other questions for the second reading? Seeing none, all those in favor? And then Councillor Kyle, if you could just finish this off with the third reading, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McAlpine, that bylaw 130-23 be read a third time, passed, signed, and executed.
All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Thank you. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda. Because we only meet when we need to meet, I just need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Owen, we stand adjourned. Thank you.